Ramanujan for G is now available on the Google Play Store. Try it out for free.
Yeah, today basically most of the concepts that we need to understand some very basic things about the solutions we have already understood. What those are mainly the concentration terms, and what are those concentration terms, and how are they defined? Those things that we know, I have explained them in great details, and we have also seen some numerical problems based on that. So now let us move to this solubility, and after we understand solubility, we will also see certain factors which affect the solubility of a solute in a solvent. And then we'll look at these things like solubility of gases also in a solvent, particularly in water, that we will be focusing on. And there we will study Henry's law that we know sometimes ago in chemical equilibrium. I have also explained once Henry's law. And then if necessary, if the time permits, we will see whatever else comes to the next. So let us comes to the solubility, and the solubility I have explained, if you remember, in our chemical equilibrium, particularly ionic equilibrium portion, the solubility. Whenever this term solubility comes, one thing that comes to our mind is the dissolution. If you do not understand dissolution, you will not understand solubility. So what is a dissolution? So dissolution doesn't mean the dissolution was the whatever the mixing of a solid into a solvent. Dissolution means if there is a solute, particularly in this chapter, we will be focusing mostly on binary solutions. And binary solution again, mm, I just but it means that binary solution means there are only two components to the solution. Two components. If there are only two components, means out of which one will be solvent and another will be the solute. And which one is the solvent? That we know solvent, which the component which is in excess is the solvent, and someone which is in not in excess and a small amount, that is called that we consider as solute. And so the dissolution means if you add a solute to a solvent, whether it is solid, liquid, or gas, initially you have taken a particular pure substance, that is solute, and another pure substance, that is a solvent. So those two things, when you consider, you have taken. So what we see in the solutes itself, there will be one kind of molecular interactions, or whatever, if it is a something that elemental form. So there might be elemental, even elemental in the atomic form, like that we see in metals, and metals usually they do not dissolve. So just one thing, if that is in the whatever the forms they are, there will be intermolecular interactions. So the interparticle interactions, if you want to describe it in a more general way, there will be interparticle interaction between the solute particles, and similarly there will be interaction between the particles of solvent as well. And because they are separated, they are separate entities, we have taken them separately. Once you mix them both, so what will happen now, the particles of solute will start interacting with the particles of solvent. Interacting means, one way you say, they start talking to each other. Initially they were talking to themselves, same type of identical particles. Now they are talking to some other type of particles. And that is some analogy that you can consider, that like in a family, almost all members are from the same family. Usually they have quite similar psychology, attitude, these kind of things. But when they go to marriages or some other places, they start interacting with some other family members, and there are some new kind of interactions and new kind of bonding also forms. And this need kind of bonding, it will depend whether this, whatever the initial set of interactions, and that the family setup and the psychology that is there for one family, and there is another family, they have these two things that they consider, that our psychology, our matching would be suitable, then they go for a match, and what is the marriage, other things happens. Similarly, what happens here now, the two particles, one particle of the solute in a one is from the solute in a binary solution, another from the solvent, they come together. If you try to mix them, or mix them, keep together in one pot, and they start interacting. While interacting, what happens if the interaction between solute and solvent particles is stronger, or the similar or comparable to the interaction between solvent and solute, then the solute particles, as they start going into the solution. Going into the solution means, what we initially they were one particle of solute were surrounded by only solute particles, and similarly solvent particles were surrounded by all the solvent particles. Now if that's going into the solute going into the solution phase means now one particle of solute will be surrounded by many particles of the solvent because solvent is in excess. Similarly means the solute particles are now separated. This happens whether you take a ionic solute or you take a molecular solute. And what are the ionic solute, molecular solute, or solids or crystals? Those things in the case of particularly when it is a solid, then these things we have seen for the case of solids in the solid states when I explained solid state. However, based on these interactions, what if the interaction between particles are ionic interactions, if the compound is ionic compound, then it is that we know the ions will be separated out. So ions will be separated out. If the molecule is, you can consider if the solute is a molecular solute. Molecular solute means the interaction between molecules is non-covalent interaction. And non-covalent interactions, particularly the what we consider in general a general term that is given to us is the van der Waals interactions. They interact with each other through van der Waals interactions. There are many types of van der Waals interactions. One is the dispersion interaction, or there might be electrostatic, pure electrostatic interactions. There is a larger dipole, a strong dipole between them. So anyway, so this process of solute particles now interacting more efficiently with the solvent particles, they are getting separated, means the solute particles getting separated. This process is called dissolution. And once you understand dissolution, now let us come to the solubility. This is not only for the solids only. This may be true for even if the solute is solvent, or if so solute is a liquid, or it is also true for the gaseous solutes. So let us come to now solubility. The solubility is the maximum amount of solute that can be dissolved in a specified amount of solvent at a specified temperature to form a saturated solution. So again, another term that came to the saturated solution. So what I have started is, so once you have taken, suppose you take a fixed amount of solvent, or maybe suppose in a vessel, or maybe in a volumetric flask, or whatever the flask, what you take 100 ml of the solvent, and now we start adding pinch by pinch salt molecules or salt crystals. That's not molecules. You cannot add molecules because you cannot separate one molecule. They are very small, very tiny. So it's some salt crystals you start adding, and you start shaking. While shaking, what are you doing? You are facilitating the separation of solute particles. So this is what the with the shaking and steering what we do. And so once they start going, after certain time, what will you see? If you add even a single particle, the next particle will not go into the solution. It won't dissolve. It won't go into the solution phase. This at the point where even adding single particles is to the solution phase is not possible. It's that phase, that state is called the saturated state, or the solution is called the saturated solution. And what we know, even the dissolution of a solute into a solvent is an equilibrium process. So in equilibrium process means at the saturation, when the saturation point is achieved, at that point the equilibrium is established and that equilibrium, it means if the solute is solvent, and if the solute is solvent, so another thing that will happen, equilibrium is there is reverse process also that happens at that process called a crystallization. And if the solute is if the solute is a gas molecule, so what will happen? So immediately the gas molecules will escape. The reverse process is escaping of gas molecules from the solution phase. It will escape out and it will go to the gaseous phase where the gaseous solute other particles are there. So what we know, so this is what the saturated solution means. The solubility is the maximum amount of a solute that can be added to a fixed amount of solvent at a given temperature at a specified or fixed temperature. So solubility usually, why fixed temperature? Because fixed temperature when we are talking about means that solubility also depends on the solubility means the amount of solute that is dissolved. It also depends on the temperature. So if you want to define solubility maximum amount, you have to also define the temperature. Then why the fixed amount of solvent or a specified amount of solvent? Why? Because if you add a extra amount of solvent, it means suppose a saturated solution is there. Now you add suppose some extra 100 ml solvent. What does it mean? Now we have disturbed the equilibrium. You have disturbed the saturation. Now per solvent particles, there will be less number of solute particles, and that means the saturation is now disturbed. Saturation is not achieved, and this means the equilibrium is disturbed. And equilibrium is disturbed means it will now system will try to regain equilibrium. That equilibrium when you add even extra amount of solute. And if saturation is not achieved, then this dissolution and the particle is not this is not at the equilibrium position, means the equilibrium is not established. This is what we know. This is what we should also remember and understand. Now, the solubility, the factors that affect the solubility, there are three factors that we usually consider that affect the solubility. So one is the nature of solute and solvent. Nature means the chemical nature. When we talk about nature, means the chemical nature of solute and solvent. And what are the chemical nature that is really responsible for the dissolution or the solubility of a solute into a solvent? So this is what the polar and non-polar nature, and what is polar nature and what is non-polar nature. This is what we have already seen in chemical bonding. And the polar means all the ionic solids. Whenever we talk about ionic solids or even any ionic compounds, so usually ionic compounds, they exist as solids. So usually it is not always. So it means they are polar molecules. And polar molecules, if they are solid, usually solvents we don't consider as anyway. So now the similar thing can happen. The polarity can also be there in not only the ionic compound, even the covalent compounds. We also see certain polarity, and the polarity means that there is a then here we talk about the polarity of a particular bond. And if those polar bonds and there is a polarity in a bond, then polarity means there is a dipole moment associated with that bond. And why that dipole moment is generated or originated, how it being created, this is because of the difference in electronegativity of the bonded atoms. So if the two bonded atoms are there, they are bound together by covalent bonds, and if there is a difference in electronegativity, and what is the origin of difference in electronegativity, so there we go to the effective nuclear charge. If there one atom has a larger effective nuclear charge, so its electronegativity will be larger or more. So if there is and if the electronegativity will be more or greater, then what will happen? So shared pair of electron will be shifted towards the higher electronegative atom. And if the shared pair of electron is not exactly between two bonded atoms, it is somehow shifted towards the higher electronegative atom. So what does it mean? Means the electron density, certain electron density is depleted from the less electronegative atom, and it has gone to some excess of electron density is there towards the more electronegative atom. And so this type of this effect is called the polarization effect. And polarization effect means that there is some polarity that is being created into the bond, and because of that one bond, that particular bond is polar. And if the bonded atoms are same atoms, identical atoms like Cl2 diatomic molecules, Cl2, chlorine, oxygen, nitrogen, whatever the diatomic molecules that you usually diatomic, mononuclear diatomic molecules. Not only diatomic molecule is carbon monoxide as well, so but not only diatomic, particularly mononuclear diatomic molecules. Mononuclear means the identical atoms are there, the nucleus is same, and so in that case the bonds are non-polar. Other bonds are polar bonds. And then even if the molecule possesses a polar bond, it doesn't mean the molecule is a polar molecule. How? This is because if the two bonds, there's bond moments, these are vector quantities. If two vectors are arranged against each other at 180 degree, it means if they are opposite to each other in same magnitude, then what will happen? Both the vectors will cancel out each other, and then the resultant vector will be zero. It means there is no dipole moment. Suppose the same magnitude of dipole moment is along positive x direction, and same magnitude with the same magnitude, one dipole is towards the negative x direction, negative x axis in a molecule. In such a case, what will happen? The magnitude is same, direction is opposite, so net dipole moment will be zero. So this is the example, the linear molecule, and with the opposite dipole moment, opposite bond moments. This is the carbon dioxide. There are two CO polar bonds, but both the polar bonds having same bond moment, but they are oriented at opposite to each other at 180 degrees, so they cancel out each other. So the carbon dioxide doesn't have a permanent dipole anyway. So similarly, we can see the methane, carbon tetrachloride, other examples where the polar bonds are there, bond moment is there, but the molecule is not a polar molecule. And similarly, if the molecule is polar and if it is a solute, so what we call is a polar solute. If the molecule is non-polar and it is solute, so you will say it is a non-polar solute. And if the molecule is a solvent and it is polar in nature, then you call it a polar solvent, like water, ammonia, liquid ammonia, they are polar solvents. And the non-polar solvents, when the molecule is non-polar, there is no net dipole moment associated with that molecule, a non-polar molecule, and it has and this is the molecule means this is non-polar solvent. And example of non-polar solvents is that we know the benzene is one of the solvent and benzene is a organic solvent and it is a non-polar solvent. Why? Because the benzene structure, it is a planar structure and there are 6 CH bonds. All the bonds are having certain bond movements. They are polar bonds, but one bond cancels there are 3 pairs of opposite bonds and each pair cancels out bond moments of the other in the pair, and that is how we get the net dipole moment 0. So there are many molecules. Carbon tetrachloride, it's another solvent which is a non-polar solvent. So you can see many such examples of the non-polar solvents as well. Now what other factors of the nature? So nature of solvent and solute, it affects the solubility. How it affect, we'll see one by one, step by step, everything. Now the temperature. If you talk about the effect of temperature on the solubility, it means then there are two terms that actually we need to understand. Another one is exothermicity, or whether the dissolution is exothermic or endothermic. And exothermic and endothermic processes we have studied in thermodynamics. And exothermic means if during a process, whether it is a physical process or a chemical process, if heat is evolved, then the process is an exothermic process. And if heat is absorbed, from the surrounding, then this during a process, whether it is physical or chemical, then this process is called endothermic process. And then the pressure. Whenever we talk about the effect of pressure on solubility, there one thing that we must consider and that we must think about is the compressibility. Whether the solute or the solvent, whatever you have taken, whether they are compressible or not. Usually solids and liquids have their very less compressibility. They are not easily compressible. So usually pressure, effect of pressure, we do not observe on the when the solutes and solvents are liquids and solids, or vice versa. So now let us look at this effect one by one. The solubility of solid in a liquid. Solid in a liquid means here your solute is solid and liquid is a solvent. So solubility of solid in a liquid, when we talk about, not in general, whenever we talk about, what we talk about, the like dissolves like. This is one term that you should remember. Like dissolves like. Like dissolves like you like-minded people. Everyone like-minded people, and they make friendship. So similarly, the molecule in the chemicals or chemical entities, they also have similar behavior. So if the solute is polar, and when we talk about the nature, so solute is polar. So polar solute likes polar solvent. So polar solute will be dissolved in polar solvent, and it will not be dissolved in non-polar solvents. Similarly, non-polar solutes will be dissolved in non-polar solvents, and they will not be dissolved in polar solvents. Non-polar solute will go with non-polar solvent, and polar solute will only go with the polar solvent. Like dissolves like, and like. So this is how it happens. The dissolution that I have already explained. So let us, the solubility of a solid in liquid, when we consider, we also talk about dissolution. So what is dissolution in this perspective? Let's understand this. When a solid solute is added to the solvent, some solute dissolves and its concentration increases in solution. Once it dissolves, it goes into the solution phase. Going into solution phase, I have explained. I hope you have understood it. And now this process is known as dissolution. When it goes into the solution phase, initially the solute has separate identity, solvent had separate identity. As soon as you have added them together, but after certain time, solute particles will dissolve. They will mingle with the solvent particles. This is the dissolution. The process is dissolution. And while dissolving a solute into the solvent, what we see, if we keep adding the solute into the solvent, it will keep dissolving, and after a certain time what we achieve a saturated solution, whether when even not a single particle or single molecule of a solute can further be added to the solvent, to the solution phase. And that phase is the saturation phase. And what we see, if you add further particles, then the crystallization can also occur. And crystallization, as I have explained just now, crystallization is opposite to dissolution. And so if you add more and more particles, what will happen? Some particles, it is not that if the solute you have added, it will not go into the solution phase. It will go into the solution phase. But similarly, in the reverse process will also happen. And what is that reverse process? So some solute particles will collide with each other into the solution, because the particles move into the solution, and after while colliding, they will cling to each other, and that is why they will crystallize. So one way, at one place the dissolution will happen, and another place the crystallization will happen. And so the crystallization is opposite to the dissolution of a solid into a liquid. And this process that we know, so at equilibrium, rate of dissolution is equal to the rate of crystallization. So this is equilibrium. Whenever we reach to the equilibrium, the rate of dissolution will be equal to the rate of crystallization. And at this stage, concentration of solute in solution will remain constant under the given condition. And this given condition of temperature, so the concentration of solute will be constant there. And such a solution is said to be saturated solution with a given solute. This is what we know. And thus the saturated solution, the definition we have already understood. So this I am not going to explain. Now the unsaturated, let us understand the unsaturated solution. Saturated, that we know. Unsaturated is we I don't think I need to explain it, but anyway, just let us see this definition. So unsaturated means it is a solution in which more amount of solute can be dissolved at the same temperature. It means the further you can further add certain solute particles, and if that solute particle goes into the solution phase, means what this can be any concentration. So at that, whatever that concentration could be, and if you add certain solute particles and it goes into the solution phase, it gets dissolved. It means the solution is unsaturated solution, and this dissolution will happen only when the saturation state is not achieved. Now let us see the effect of temperature on solubility of a solid in a liquid, and solid in a liquid, the dissolution that we have seen. And here what we consider, the equilibrium process that has been equilibrium at the saturation level. And the equilibrium, whenever that equilibrium is achieved, we also talk about there the exothermicity and endothermicity. This is what I have said to you. The effect of temperature on dissolution is understood through the exothermicity and endothermicity of the process. And an exothermic process is represented as delta H is less than 0. Delta H is less than 0. It means heat content of the product, the product, that something that is obtained after the dissolution, is less than the heat content of the separate particles, the solute plus solvent particles. And if that is less, it means some amount of heat has already gone into the surrounding. That heat has been dissipated into the surrounding, and by that amount, the heat that has gone into the surrounding, by that amount, the process is exothermic. And when you increase the temperature for an exothermic process, initially, why heat was evolved during the reaction? Heat was evolved during the reaction because for this set of solute and solvents, if they were at particular temperature, a heat content was something, suppose some value it was having, that heat content, with that it was not stable. And to gain the stability, it has dissipated heat into the surrounding. And if it means that was not stable, with that heat content, a stable condition was not stable. And now if you heat the solution, if you heat the solution, what will happen means you are increasing the temperature. If you are increasing the temperature, means you are increasing the heat content. And if you are increasing the heat content, the something which was stable at lower temperature and low heat content, that will not be now stable at higher temperature. So what will happen? The reverse process will happen. So the crystallization will happen, and the crystallization will happen, and the rate of crystallization at particular temperature will increase, and that means the solubility will decrease. The solubility of that solute in the solvent will decrease. So if the process dissolution is exothermic process, means the delta H is negative. Why negative? Because heat content of product minus heat content of reactant. This is what we call it the delta H in chemistry. And this product is here the dissolved state, and reactant here is the undissolved state, means pure solvent and pure solute. And so heat, the dissolved state, its heat is less, means amount of heat has evolved and it has gone into the surrounding, it has been dissipated. Now if the process is endothermic, means the heat is absorbed from the surrounding. So during the dissolution, heat is absorbed, and certain examples you can see, like even if you add glucose into water, what we see, that solution becomes cold. It means that even the pot becomes cold. Like if you put 100 ml solution in a glass and then you add 10 gram or 50 gram of glucose, what we'll see, this glass will become cold. It means the dissolution, the glucose, if it goes into the solution phase, it gets dissolved completely, but during the process the glass becomes cold. It means it has absorbed heat from the surrounding. And what is the surrounding immediate to that solution was? It was glass. And similarly, glass will also absorb heat from the air or something, or air particles. Anyway, I'm sorry. So this is the certain example that you might have seen. And the exothermic, and not only in the dissolution, but this is one thing. Remember, salt is also exothermic. NaCl is also slightly endothermic. This is why if you increase the heat, usually increasing heat means the dissolution will increase. Even if you add sugar, if you are dissolving sugar in water, if you heat it, the more sugar particles you can add, and it will go into the solution to make a syrup while making sweets. That kind of thing that we do. So these processes for this sugar and the salt and the glucose that we see, they are endothermic processes. It means that during the dissolution, heat is absorbed, and heat is absorbed, and if you provide it, means this process will be facilitated, and facilitated means the solubility will increase. The effect of and the nature of the solute and solvent that we have seen already, an effect of pressure on solubility of a solid in a liquid. This is what I have already explained, because the solids and liquids, they are incompressible. It means there will be no effect of pressure on the solubility of a solid in a liquid. Now let us look at the solubility of a gas in a liquid, and solubility of a gas in a liquid is also a very important example, and we see certain things in our day-to-day life as well. So there are many gases that are dissolved in water, and that we know oxygen dissolved in water. If oxygen is dissolved in water, that is how the aquatic animals survive, because they also need oxygen for their survival, for their respiration, and that oxygen they get from the water. Water means the dissolved oxygen. And the cold drinks, when you see cold drinks, and in the cold drinks, I mean soda water, what is the carbon dioxide, which is also a gas, it is dissolved in the solution. Particularly it is the mostly it is the water is solvent there. So then now in the soda water and the cold drinks, what is the carbon dioxide, which is a gas, it is dissolved in water. So solubility of gases in liquids, such examples that we see here. Now let us look at the factors affecting solubility of gas says in a liquid, and the effect of pressure. First thing is the effect of pressure on solubility of gases in liquids. And the pressure, whenever the pressure we are talking, and here what we have considered, solute as a gas, and the solvent is a liquid. That is why the solubility of gases in liquids, this is what we have looked into. So the gas, if you are considering solute particle as gas, then if you increase the pressure, and gases are very highly compressible, they are easily compressible, it means if you increase the pressure, the solubility might be affected. And how it will be affected, let us see. So gas solubility in liquid increases with increase in pressure. And if you increase the pressure, like here in this example, when we see in this pot, what we see, a smaller weight is kept above the piston, and if you increase the weight, what happens, the pressure will increase because this weight according it will apply certain force. A force per unit area is pressure. So if you apply pressure, put weight here, what will happen, the gases will be compressed, and with the because the gases will be compressed, what will you see, if you can measure concentration of a particular gas that you have chosen in this solution, and the concentration you can also measure in this solution, what will you find, concentration of gas in this solution will be more. Why? Because you have increased the pressure here, and because of the pressure, the gases are compressible. Now gases are now the same amount of gas or same particles of gas will be in a smaller volume, and if the same amount of gas is in a smaller volume, and this dissolution is also an equilibrium process, so what will happen, the equilibrium is disturbed after applying the pressure. So what will it try, it will try to regain that equilibrium, and to regain that equilibrium, more and more gas molecules will go into the solution, and more gas molecules will go into the solution, is the solubility of gas has increased. So when we increase the pressure of the system by compressing the gas molecules present in the solution, as a result of an increased pressure, the gas molecules will now be concentrated in a smaller volume, and gas molecules will be concentrated in a smaller volume, means the pressure you are increasing. Why pressure you are increasing? More molecules are there in a smaller volume, so they will collide with the wall more frequently, because the wall compressing means you are decreasing the volume, and with the decrease in volume, pressure also increases. This we have seen in the gaseous state. Anyway, I'm just explaining it briefly. In a smaller volume, the same number of gas molecules will be there. So gas molecules will collide with the walls because the smaller volume is there more frequently. If they will collide more frequently, and this then there will be more frequent change in the momentum, and each change in momentum there will be associated with the force, and force per unit area is the pressure. This thing probably you have, or you might have read in this pressure, force, these definitions, change in momentum, how it is associated with the force. This is the Newton's second law. These things you might have studied in your physics class. So what happens, as a result, an increase in pressure, the gas molecules will now be concentrated in a smaller volume. This will result in an increase in the number of gas molecules per unit volume available above the solution. This I have already explained. I'm just reading out once again. Since the number of gas molecules present above the solution has increased, the rate with which the gas molecule will be entering the solution will also increase. Why it will increase is the same thing, that because the equilibrium is disturbed. And this equilibrium, this thing we have seen in chemical equilibrium chapter. So how you can see this particular chapter is associated with many different chapters, and that is why it is in 12th. So whatever the chapters that I have mentioned here till now, chapters related to chemistry or even to physics, everything is there in the 11th physics or chemistry 11th standard. So that is why this chapter is given into the 12th standard. So since the number of gas molecules present above the solution has increased, so entering the solution, the end result is an increase in the number of gas molecules in solution until a new equilibrium point is attained. This equilibrium point, so with increased pressure, equilibrium is disturbed. And now if you are more gas molecules you go into the solution, means here the gas molecules you are compressing, what you are doing means that gas, while compressing, suppose no gas molecule has gone into the solution or the solvent, it has not mixed, the same number of particles are there. Now we have decreased the volume, so number of particles are same, means the number of moles is same, and number of moles is same, but you have decreased the volume, means the concentration you have increased. If you have increased the concentration, now you can understand this in terms of equilibrium, in terms of concentration itself. And the concentration that was there initially into the concentration of gas into the solution, that was some smaller concentration, that with that concentration and with the larger volume there was equilibrium. Now if you increase the concentration here, the concentration in the solvent phase, if it is solution phase, if it is not changed, means you have disturbed the equilibrium. The Q, the reaction coefficient that we can calculate here, it will be less than that one should have at the equilibrium position. So the gas will now move into the solution, so the product concentration will increase. Now the gas concentration in this will increase because more and more gases are here, and if the gases will move into the solution phase, the concentration of gas will also decrease in this fixed volume, and this is how this dissolution happens. Anyway, the solubility of gases increases with increase in pressure of a gas above the solution. And this is what we also study in the Henry's law. And Henry actually he has explained this, and he has given some the way to quantitatively estimate how one can find out the concentration of gas. How what is the concentration of gas? If you know this is the partial pressure of gas above the solution. To get that, we resort to Henry's law, and Henry gives a quantitative relation between the pressure and solubility of a gas in a liquid. And the pressure when there is only one gas. If there are more than one gases, then means there we talk about the partial pressure. So that thing you should have in mind. But here, since we are talking mostly about the binary solution, so we will talk mostly about one gas, and gas as a solute and one solvent, and particularly the water mostly we consider as a solvent. But this concept is general. It can be applied to other solvents and solutes as well. The solvents and gaseous solutes. And solvent means the liquid solvent. The solubility of the what the Henry's law states that the solubility of a gas in a liquid is directly proportional to the partial pressure of the gas present above the surface of liquid or solution. Means if you increase the partial pressure of the gas, the solubility of that gas will increase, and this means it is proportionally. If you increase the pressure in the same proportion, the concentration of gas will increase into the solution. One can tell the same thing in other way, and this other way is the partial pressure of a gas above a solution is proportional to the mole fraction of the gas in the solution. The partial pressure is proportional to the mole fraction of gas into the solution. It means the P, the partial pressure, suppose partial pressure of a given gas is P above the solution, will be proportional to the mole fraction. And what is mole fraction? That we know mole fraction is the number of moles of a solute divided by number of moles of all the components of the solvent. And all the components in the case of binary solution, here it will be the number of moles of solute plus number of moles of the solvent. And so that is the mole fraction. So P will be proportional to the mole fraction X of the gas, and gas is solute here. Now, if you remove the proportionality, we need to add certain constant, and that constant we add to make this equal. So P is equal to Kh into X, and this Kh is called the Henry's law constant. This is Kh is what it is called. Kh means the K, you know, usually K is a constant that we denote, and H is a Henry's law. This Kh is a Henry's law constant. P is partial pressure of the gas. If there are more than one gas, and if there is only one gas, that could be the total pressure. That could be equal to the total pressure, and X is the mole fraction of the gas in the solution. What is the mole fraction of gas into the solution? This is what you should understand. And P is the partial pressure above the solution. It is not into the solution. It is above the solution. Partial pressure means it will be pressure of a gas. Now, but does it mean P proportional to X? It means if you plot a graph between P and X mole fraction, you should get a straight line, and that straight line should go from the origin. Why? Because if you X is 0, P will be 0. Which is Kh into 0 will be 0, so P will be 0. So if P is 0, anyway X will be 0 as well. So P 0 divided by Kh will be 0. So it should go from the origin, and this is one experimental results for the solubility of HCl gas in cyclohexane at 293 Kelvin. This graph is obtained at 293 Kelvin. And what is reported here, you can see this is a straight line, and a straight line, this is going from the origin. For the HCl hydrochloric acid is a gas, and different gases based on this what we know. There could be, suppose there is another graph that to obtain for another gas. If that graph goes below this straight line, what does it mean? If this from this graph, what can you obtain? dP by dx and dP by dx. So P by x, if this is a straight line, it is P by x, you can also write. So P by x is nothing but Kh, and the slope gives us the Henry's law constant, or by a value of Henry's law constant. And this partial pressure and mole fraction of gas we can measure through experiment, and based on that one can estimate Henry's law value of for a particular gas. You should remember that Henry's law constant is constant for a particular gas. It is not constant for all the gases. It is not an universal constant. It is a constant for a particular gas. So its value is fixed. So for HCl, it is some another one graph with certain slope. There can be for another gas that graph may go below this, another for some other gas it may go above this. So this is why I am explaining, because you may see certain questions based on this graph. And when this, if suppose there is another graph here that goes below, and if someone asks which gas is more dissolved in water, then, or which solubility of which gas is more, and that you should find out based on the value of kh. Means this, if that is going by this way means the slope is less. It is going slope is less means, probably I think you understand slope. If this go the value of y divided by x, suppose I am going from 0 to up to this place what I am, the less value of y I have traveled, but in x I have traveled to the same value, same extent, and this means y divided by x will be lesser for that case. Means the Henry's law constant will be lesser if that slope is, that straight line goes below this graph. It means the value of kh is less, and if the value of kh is less, though at the partial pressure for both the gases that you have applied during the experiment is same, then what does it mean? Which again solubility is less? That we can infer, we can find out from the Henry's law constant if you understand solubility based on that. So different gases have different kh values at same temperature. This suggests that kh is a function of the nature of the gas. So kh is a function of the nature of gas. Depending on the nature of the gas, kh value may change. So higher the value of kh at a given pressure, the lower is the solubility of the gas in the liquid. So if I say kh will be equal to P by X, kh is P by X. So for at a give, you consider two gases and keep the partial pressure or pressure in, if they are in two different experiments, the pressure of those gases constant, and you get the kh value for one gas is high and one gas is less. This is from the slope. Then what does it mean? The kh value is high. What does it mean? Kh value is high means P divided by X is high, and P divided by X is high. What does it mean? Means the value of X is less because P is already constant. P divided by X is higher value for a particular gas means the value of X is smaller, and the value of X is smaller means the solubility of that particular gas is less. And this is how we get is that from the kh value, if the gas is here, the slope goes from here below this, it means the solubility of that gas will be, the kh value is larger, means the solubility of that gas will be more. And if that the slope goes above this for HCl curve, HCl, then it means the solubility of that gas will be less. And this is what we infer from the Henry's law constant, and these certain values of Henry's law constant is given for certain gases. The helium, let us consider some values and what we get from those values. So helium, what we get, the value of kh is 144.97 kilobar, and for hydrogen it is 69.16 bar. Which value is more? It is more for the helium. So helium, the kh value Henry's law constant is more. It means the helium solubility of helium is less than solubility of hydrogen. If you compare solubility of hydrogen and nitrogen, you can find out the kh value is more for nitrogen, less for hydrogen, means the solubility of hydrogen is more than the solubility of nitrogen. Now let us consider this two value for nitrogen at two different temperatures, and what we see at 293 Kelvin temperature, the kh value for nitrogen is 76.48, and at 303 Kelvin at higher temperature its value has increased. Its value has increased, kh value has increased at higher temperature means increasing the temperature. What you have done, you have decreased the solubility of nitrogen, and this solubility is kh here is the water. This value is given for the water, so it means that on increasing the temperature, solubility of nitrogen in water will decrease. Similarly, we consider the values for oxygen, and oxygen, if we simply see at the same temperature 293 Kelvin, the kh value is lesser, smaller for oxygen, means oxygen is more dissolved in nitrogen, and the solubility of oxygen is more than nitrogen. Now, if you look at the kh value for oxygen at two different temperatures, at higher temperature, what we see, the value of kh has increased, and value of KH has increased means at higher temperature solubility of oxygen has also decreased, and solubility of oxygen has decreased means it has certain repercussions as well. It means some things that we recently we talk about the global warming, and global warming means the increase in the temperature of the earth. Increasing the temperature of earth, what are we doing? We are increasing the value of KH, and by increasing the value of KH, what we are doing? We are decreasing the solubility of oxygen in water, and oxygen solubility of oxygen less in water, it means less amount of oxygen will be there in water at a given temperature, and less amount of oxygen in water, what does it mean? As aquatic animals are dependent on the dissolved oxygen in water, so they will be very uncomfortable, they will be discomfortable, and if the oxygen concentration decrease significantly, they will die. And this is what this another inference could be, that this is why, because the aquatic animals are more comfortable at lower temperature. So, and it is I think this, and now let us look at the other side of this table. The value of KH is least for formaldehyde. Formaldehyde, it is 1.83 into 10 to the power minus 5. So out of all the chosen gases here, what we see, the solubility of formaldehyde will be highest if these values are not given. All the 298 Kelvin here in this table we can consider. Now all above all these values, even what we see, even for these gases, this is also not going to less than this. So what we see, all among all the gases, one can consider the formaldehyde solubility in water is maximum at 298 Kelvin. And this one can also understand very easily, like polar, like dissolves like. Formaldehyde is a polar molecule which is a solute here. And water is also a polar molecule which has a very high dipole moment, very high dielectric constant. The polarity is also understood in terms of dielectric constant. So if dielectric constant value is larger, means the molecule is, or the compound is, or the substance is more polar. And the more polar, what is the dielectric constant? That definition we get from the electrostatics. So how much the force in a particular medium, that if you put that substance between two charged particles, by what extent that force has decreased, that value gives us the dielectric constant. So dielectric constant, one way is dielectric constant more means the molar polar solvent. Usually a general trend, though it may not be exactly true for all the cases, but a general trend is maintained. So now the formaldehyde is polar molecule. Out of these all molecules, even if they are polar, their polarity is very less. Argon, you know, the noble gas, it is a monoatomic gas, it's non-polar. CO2 is also non-polar. These gases that we see, they are all non-polar. Why they are non-polar? These are diatomic gases, and their identical atoms are there in one molecule. Helium is a single atomic gas. This is what the electron density should be ideally uniform, though it is not always uniform. So these are also non-polar things. The out of them, the formaldehyde is most polar, and most polar means its dissolution will be, or the solubility will be highest in water, and that we see from the value of KH, which is least for formaldehyde. And formaldehyde, what, how it is polar? So it is, its structure is HC double bond OH, and there is C double bond O. This is a polar bond, and CH bond is also polar, and their direction of all these dipole moments of bond moments, they go somehow, some net resultant dipole moment we obtain for formaldehyde. So it's a polar molecule. Now let us look into the effect of temperature on solubility of gases in liquids. Gas solubility in liquids is found to decrease with increase in temperature. The gas, why? If someone says you that the gas solubility in liquid is found to decrease, this is what we have seen in these examples for the nitrogen and oxygen. It means the solubility of gas in water is an exothermic process. So if you increase the temperature, that is why if you increase the temperature, solubility of gas has decreased in water. And so as we know that the dissolution is exothermic process, so this is what, because of the Le Chatelier's principle I have explained. And the Le Chatelier's principle, what will happen if they increase the temperature, equilibrium will be disturbed. To obtain the equilibrium, the certain reshuffling will happen, and in this reshuffling, what we see, the equilibrium constant is also changed. And the effect of solubility, we see the solubility will decrease there. Let us see now this numerical problems based on the Henry's law. If the nitrogen gas is bubbled through water at 293 Kelvin, how many millimoles of nitrogen gas would dissolve in 1 liter of water? So what amount of water we have taken? 1 liter. And what is water here? Water is a solvent. And what is solute? It is nitrogen gas. Now assume that nitrogen exerts a partial pressure of 0.987 bar. So what is the partial pressure of nitrogen? It is 0.987 bar. So this partial pressure is also given. Given that Henry's law constant for nitrogen at 293 Kelvin is 76.48 kilobar. So
லைட்ட போடுறா
So this is 76.48 kilobar, means the Henry's law constant, and this we can find out. The Henry's law constant value is given, the partial pressure of nitrogen is given here. What can we calculate very easily? We can calculate the mole fraction of nitrogen into the solution. And how it is related? So partial pressure of nitrogen, the pressure of nitrogen will be equal to the will be equal to this equation. This P is equal to Kh into X, mole fraction of nitrogen into the Henry's law constant. So Kh for nitrogen will be equal to partial pressure of nitrogen divided by mole fraction of nitrogen. This is what I have written directly, this formula. So mole fraction of nitrogen will be equal to partial pressure of nitrogen divided by Henry's law constant for nitrogen. And the partial pressure of nitrogen we obtained from here, it is given already, and the Henry's law constant value is also given. And Henry's law constant value is a kilobar. The kilobar means this is 76.48 kilobar. In bar we have to put, because this partial pressure is given in bar. So to get both the pressure values in one unit, so I have multiplied here 76.48 from the 1000. So what we get is 76,480 bar. And this value, once you solve, what we will get 1.29 into 10 to the power minus 5. This is a mole fraction, which is unitless. So there is no unit that is shown here. Now what we know, but what we have to find out is the millimoles of nitrogen gas. We get the mole fraction, but we don't get here directly the millimoles, but we can find out millimoles. And how will we find out millimoles? That this gas, this mole fraction that we obtained, it is in 1 liter of water, and 1 liter water means how many moles of water? So 1 liter water means 1 kilogram water. The density of water is 1 gram per ml. 1 gram per ml. So 1 liter water, 1 liter means how much? 1000 ml water. 1000 ml water means, and 1 gram per ml means 1000 gram water. 1000 gram water. Once we know the mass of water, we also know the molecular weight of water, molecular mass of water, which is 80. 2 from 2 hydrogen and 16 from oxygen. So 2 plus 16 is 18. So number of moles of water we can also calculate. How we calculate it is the mass of a particular substance divided by molecular weight of that substance. And the mass of that substance for water is 1000 gram divided by 18 gram molar mass of water, and 1000 divided by 18 is 55 moles of water is there in 1 liter of water. Now let us consider n moles of nitrogen is there into the solution. Is the dissolved nitrogen into the solution, the number of moles is n. So if then let us consider this. Now the mole fraction we can obtain. Mole fraction of nitrogen will be equal to number of moles of nitrogen divided by number of moles of nitrogen plus number of moles of water. This is the total number of moles of all the components of the solution, and this is the particular component for which we are calculating the mole fraction. Now what we see, the n value of n must be very less, very smaller as comparison to 55.5. That is why this value is very less. It is in the order of 10 to the power minus 5. So here you can ignore value of n in comparison to this. If it is in plus or minus, we can ignore mathematically. There will be no substantial change in the result. So that if we ignore this, the things will be very easy for us. So this value we ignore. So what we get, n moles divided by 55.5 moles. So mole will be cancelled out, n divided by 55.5, and this x value of x we have obtained, and this is here. 1.29 into 10 to the power minus 5. So what can I write? 10 divided by 55.5 equals to 1.29 into 10 to the power minus 5. Now value of n will be 1.29 into 10 to the power minus 5 into, this will go into multiplication, into 55.5. So what I get after multiplication, 7.16 into 10 to the power minus 4 mole. But this is not the final answer, because the what we have to find out millimoles. To obtain the millimoles from moles, we have to multiply this number from 1000. So this is what, because 1 millimole has 1000, 1 mole has 1000 millimoles, so we have to multiply from 1000. So once after multiplying this number 7.16 into 10 to the power minus 4 moles, what you obtain? 0.716 millimoles of nitrogen. And this is how we solve numerical problems. The applications of Henry's law and some other things, I think there is no time now, so we'll see this in our next class. Time is it is already over. If you have any problem, I'll be happy to take. I can. So please feel free to ask questions if you have any.